All right, welcome to part 4, hopefully the final part of the portal tutorial. So in this one, we're going to make it so you can actually walk through the portals. And let me just explain what we're about to do here real quick. So this is my other project. So you can see by default, you cannot walk through these blue walls. But if I put a portal on it, and I put a portal somewhere else, and I try to walk through the blue wall, and then I hit the portal, it allows me to go through. So basically what's happening here is, like I said, by default, you cannot walk through these blue walls, but there's some code in here which says, okay, well, if I'm overlapping with a portal, then allow me to start walking through the blue walls, which allows me to pass through like this. And so when I'm standing inside the portal, I'm actually not colliding at all with any of these blue walls. But we also want to make sure that when you're standing inside the portal, you can't start walking this way and suddenly walk like down the edge of this blue wall, right? So it's going to either teleport you or kick you out of the wall. So if you can imagine, there's actually a border around this portal that I added. So when you're standing inside the portal, you're actually colliding with that border. It's actually a rectangle. And so that keeps you from like jumping out of the portal or walking along the edge or doing anything weird where you can get out of the portal or behind the blue wall. And so that's kind of the general idea of what's happening. So in order to do this, we need to create a new collision channel. So let me go to Edit, Project Settings, and Collision. And then we've already added a new object channel for Portal Wall. So let me look at my other project real quick. So we also want to add one for Portal. So hit New Object Type, and we're going to call it Portal. And we're going to set this to Ignore. And we can press OK. All right, so just like we did when we added the portal wall, we want to update these presets so that they match what we would expect them to be. So if we open no collision, make sure this is set to ignore. Block all, we want to set it to block. Block all dynamic, we want overlap, or sorry, we'll just change these to match. The first ones are pretty easy because they just match whatever the other ones are. Overlap all dynamic, check that. Ignore only pawn. For this one, yeah, we just want to do block. Overlap only pawn, we want it to block. All right, so for pawn, we want to set this guy to overlap, right? Because at all times, we want the pawn to be able to overlap at least with these portals. So set that to that. Again, spectator doesn't really matter. It's probably fine. Character mesh, yeah, that should be ignore. I think that's all of the ones. And then we also want to add a preset, right? Because what I said before is that whenever the player pawn is overlapping with the portal, we don't want him to, or we want him to be able to walk through these blue walls. But if you look at pawn right now, the pawn is set to block portal walls. So we want to make a version of pawn that we can set his collision to whenever he walks inside of a portal where he actually like ignores or overlaps only the blue walls. So let's come up here and add a new preset, and we will call this our portal pawn. So this is going to be exactly like pawn is, except it's going to allow us to ignore the portal walls. So if you look at pawn, let me actually look at pawn real quick. So pawn has visibility ignored, and then it blocks everything except for portal. So if we, oops, let me add this back. So set it to portal pawn, and then we want collision enabled query and physics. Then we want to set the type to pawn, just like pawn is. And then we can just add a description here like pawn when passing through a portal. And so we want visibility ignored and then all of these blocked. Portal wall we want to ignore in this case, right? Because we're inside the portal, so we want to ignore the portal walls. And for the portal, we want to set to overlap. And then hit accept. And you can see it adds a new preset down here called portal pawn. So what we're going to do is inside of our portal, whenever we overlap with the portal, we're going to switch the player's collision to that one. So let's go to our portal and go to our event graph here. And let's see, where are we? All right, so we're going to finish this sequence later because we still need to do stuff here. But below, we want to override the event actor begin overlap, and also event actor or actor end overlap. So this is going to get called whenever anything overlaps or ends overlapping with the portal. So we really want to make sure that this only gets called once for our player. So let's go back real quick and just double check that. So let's open up our player blueprint here. So it's really important that anything in your player character that has a collision on it is set to ignore portals except for the capsule component. So if we take a look here at our collision, so the collision of the capsule is set to pawn and it's set to overlap portals, which is correct. But we want to make sure, like the mesh, for example. So the mesh is set to ignore portals, which is good. Camera doesn't have any collision on it, so nothing else has collision on it. But if you had other things in your character, you'd want to make sure, just double check, that none of them have anything that sets to overlap or blocking with portals. So I think we are actually good to go here. So back in our begin overlap, the first thing we want to do is when something overlaps with this, we really only care if the thing that we overlapped with is the player. So we're going to say cast to first person character. And then if that succeeds, then we also really only care if there's a linked portal. Because if somebody overlaps with a portal, but there's only one portal, then we don't want them to teleport anyway, so there's really nothing for us to do. So we can also say linked portal, and maybe we should actually do this first. Okay, linked portal is valid, and we'll hook this up here. And then I'm just going to add a little reroute node so we can see what's going on better. So again, if there's no portal linked to us, like we don't care because we're not going to be able to teleport them anyways. So we first want to make sure the link portal is valid, and then we want to cast and make sure that the thing that overlapped with us is in fact the player. And if it is the player, then we want to change his collision to the portal pawn collision preset that we just made. And we also want to add him to an array so we can keep track of which players are currently inside of our portal. And that way we can check if they should be teleporting. So first, let's just add it to an array. So I'm going to take this guy and promote it to a variable. And then actually just delete it over here because we're going to change it. And let's change this name to players in portal. And it's of type first person character, which is correct. And we want to make it an array. And then we can also make it private. And then we can drag this guy in, say get, and we can say add unique. And the reason we're using add unique is just in case they somehow manage to trigger the overlap event twice, we definitely want to make sure that they only get added to this array once. So add unique, and if you actually look at the return value here, it says the index of the newly added item is what it returns, or it returns index none if the item is already present in the array. So index underscore none or index underscore none is actually I think it's a pound define or an enum that evaluates to -1. So what we can do here is we can check if this is not equal to -1. And if that's true, then that means that the player was added to the array and that he didn't already exist inside of the array. And so, like I said, if that's the case, then we want to switch his collision over. So we can drag off of this guy and say get, what's it called? Capsule component. Why is that not working? Oh, we need to drag off the cast, right? So we'll add him, and then we'll drag off this guy and say get capsule component. And then we will say set collision profile name. And the collision profile name, since we are overlapping with the portal, is going to be portal pawn, which is the one we just created. Hook that up to there, like so. And then we kind of want to do the opposite for the end overlap. So we don't really need to worry about the linked portal for the end overlap. We just want to make sure that the thing we were overlapping with is the first person character. If it is, then we want to copy this guy and say remove item. And of course, the thing we want to remove is this guy. And then after that, we want to set his collision back to the normal pawn collision. So drag off this guy again and say get capsule component. And just like we did up here, we want to call this function. So I'm going to copy and paste, hook this up, and then make sure you change the collision protocol name to, oops, to pawn. Okay. Um, so at this point, we should at least be able to walk through the portals. We're not going to actually be teleported to the other portal, but we should be able to walk through it. So if we just spawn one portal and we try to walk through it, it's not going to let us because we have that check to make sure that there's actually a second portal. But if we spawn another portal and we try to walk through it now, okay, so it still doesn't appear to work. Let's see why. Oh, we probably need to adjust the collision settings on our models themselves. So let's go back here. Yeah, go into the meshes and let's open up our SN portal real quick and take a look at this guy. So if we go to show simple collision, yeah, you'll see that there's no collision on it, which is why this is not working. So we want to tell it over here in the details panel, if you search for collision, we want to tell it to use the complex collision, which are the actual triangles, for the collision, for the simple collision. And then we also want to go into our, let's go into our portal order. And let's see, does this have any simple collision on it? Let's see, show simple collision. Okay, so this seems to have collision on it for some reason. We actually just want to remove this for right now. So just say collision and remove collision. And so let's see if this lets us walk through it now. Hopefully it does. No. Let's take a look at our portal. We probably, I think, yeah. So let's go to our portal. We forgot to actually set this guy's collision with the new stuff we made. So click on the portal border mesh and search for collision on the left. So for this guy, we want to set him to, well, first of all, make sure it's set to block all dynamic, and that will get you most of the way there. And then you want to switch it over to custom. And then we want to change the object type to portal. And we want to tell it to ignore other portals. I guess that's probably fine. Yes. And then for the portal mesh, we want to also change this guy to, let's see. So we want this to be overlap all dynamic, and that will get us most of the way there. And then we can set it to custom. And then we want to change the object type again to portal. And we can tell it to ignore other portals. And so now we compile, save, try this one more time. So shoot my portals. And, oh, sorry, I added that while I was debugging. Just ignore that. You can see what's actually happening here is we are walking through this blue wall. So I know it kind of looks like we're teleporting somewhere, but we're actually not. We're actually just literally just walking right through this wall like this. And we should make sure that we can't normally walk through the blue wall. So you can see I'm trying to walk through the blue wall, and then it only lets me once I get to the portal. Now you might notice something weird here where the shadows look pretty messed up through the portal. I did a little research, and this is just caused by Lumen. So again, Unreal Engine 5 is in like a alpha state, like a pre-release state. So expect there to be bugs like this. I assume this will get fixed in the newer one, but we can actually fix this just by turning off Lumen. So if you go to the project settings and you search for Lumen, I guess it's Lumen. So if you don't know, this is their new lighting system. And for global illumination, you can just set it to none. And then now it just won't use lumen anymore. And if we try to run this and we look through it now, you can see it looks a lot nicer, the lighting. So you should be able to walk through these portals. And also make sure that if you kind of creep up to it, it should look good until you get all the way through it. Like it shouldn't start clipping things out. And that's because we lowered that near clipping plane. So if you see clipping, make sure you go back and lower the near clipping plane. Okay, so that part's working. But we want to avoid cases like this. So you notice if I get like halfway in the portal, I can kind of walk through the wall and then it pushes me out at the last second. So we don't really want the player to be able to walk out past the end of the portal like this, because right now I'm like inside of this blue wall. We want to be able to have barriers around this portal. So in order to do that, we can open up the um, border, and we want to manually add a border around this static mesh. So to do that, again, make sure you have show simple collision checked, otherwise you won't be able to see what you're doing. So we want to come up here and hit add box simplified collision. And you'll see that'll add a box around the whole thing, but that's not exactly what we want, obviously, because we want to have a border around it. So what we're going to do is, let me reference my other project so I do this right. All right, so if you search for collision on the left, now that we have this added, we can actually specify how we want this thing to be set up. So for the center, we're going to do the left first. So we're going to say negative 125, or sorry, we're going to do the top first. Negative 125, 0, 0 for all of these. And then for the x extents, we want it to be 1, so it's 1 unit thick. And then we want this to be 180 is fine, and 0 for this guy as well. So now we have just a little thin little line of collision up here at the top. And we're going to add one to the left side, the right side, or the bottom and the right. And that's going to make a border around this thing for the collision. Okay, so again, we're going to come up here and say add box simplified collision. And then we want to do the bottom now. So we're going to do 125, 0, 0. And then x extents again is going to be 1, 180, and 0. So now we got the top and the bottom. Oh, sorry, this is supposed to be 125, not 128. And then we need to do the left and the right. So collision, add box. And then for this one, it's going to be 0 on the x, and it's going to be, it's going to be negative 90 here, and 0. And then for the x extents, 250, y extent is 1, and z extent is 0. So there you go, got that side. And then finally, we want one more for the left side. So collision, add box. And then for the final one, it's going to be 0, positive 90 this time, 0, 250, 1, and 1. Sorry, the z extent up here is also supposed to be 1. Let me make sure I did that right. So the x, y, and the z, like, it should never be 0 for any of these. I think I typed 0 a few times. Yeah. So sorry, just fix those zeros. The x, y, and the z, like, it should never be 0 in any of those. So if I had 0, just put 1. So it should look like this. Sorry, I kind of butchered that a little bit, but this is what it should look like. And so you basically have this border around your portal. All right, so let's try this again. So it shouldn't let me walk out. No, it still does. Oh, let's actually go to the BP portal and click on the portal border mesh. Let's actually just change this guy to block all, because we really don't ever want there to be a case for us to not block on these walls. So now we should be able to collide with the edge. So there we go. So I try to walk into the edge and it kind of kicks me off to the side. So this is what we want. So that way it's like we can literally only walk through the middle of the portal. Okay. So now that this part is working, we just need to do the final part of this tutorial, if you can believe it or not, which is where we actually teleport the player, which really isn't all that hard now that we have gotten this far. So the final step here, so let's see, let's go, so that we need to add to the sequence here, because this is where the teleport check happens. So let's move this stuff down. And then let's move this stuff to the right a little bit, just so we have some room here. All right, and then let me open this guy up on my other monitor. Okay, so what we want to do is remember we have this players in portal array. So this is all the players that are possibly, or that are currently in our portal. Obviously, there's only ever going to be one since it's just single player right now. But so we take this guy and we do a for each loop. And then we're going to call a function here to check whether or not the player should teleport. So let's just make one more function. I think this is our last function that we're going to be making. And we're going to call it check if player should teleport. And we can make this guy private because nobody else needs access to it. So private. And then this function just needs to take in a player. So first person character. And we'll just call it player. And let's go back to the event graph and just hook this up real quick, just because I always forget to do that. So drag this in, hook this up, compile. Oh, okay, let me refresh, compile. There we go. So loop over each player in the portal and check if they should teleport. So now we just need to write this function. So we're going to be doing a lot of the same math we did for the camera stuff, because we want to put the player at the location of the new portal, but we want to make sure his rotation matches so that it's a seamless transaction or a transition. So the first thing we want to do is check to make sure that the portal, or that the player is past the portal, because once the player moves past the mesh of the portal, we at that point want to teleport him. So we just want to check out the players behind the portal, basically. So to do that, we can use the dot product. So we can say get actor location, which is the location of the player. And we want to actually check not his current position, but his future position. Because if we check his current position, then what's going to happen is he's going to walk into the portal. He's going to go past the portal, like through the portal for a frame. And then after that frame's up, it's going to say, oh, you should have teleported. And then it's going to teleport him. But for one frame, we're going to actually see the other side of the portal, which we don't want to do. So we want to predict and say, next frame, are you going to be past the portal? And if you are, then we want to go ahead and teleport them right away. So we can say add vector, or just add, I guess. So we're going to add his velocity to predict where he's going to be. So again, we can say get player here. So we want to add his velocity. So get velocity, and then multiply this by, convert this to a float, multiply this by the delta seconds, and add that to his current location. So we're basically saying his current location plus where he'll be next frame, which is velocity times delta time. So we want to get a vector from the portal's location to his future position. So we can do subtract. So subtract the portal's location, which is get actor location. So this is basically just a vector from portal to player's future location. And then we want to normalize this to get it as a direction. And then, like I said, we can take the dot product of this and the portal's forward vector to check if he is behind the portal. So we'll say dot product, and we want to use the portal's forward vector. So we'll say get actor forward vector. And we want to say float less than, or less equals is what it's called now. Sorry, they keep changing these names. It's not my fault. So less than or equal to. And so this is basically checking is player behind portal. And if that's true, then we want to do a branch here. Let me hook all of this up to the start. Okay. And if that's all true, then we want to finally teleport the player. Okay, so I lied. So we actually are making one more function. I think this is actually the final function. I might be wrong, but we'll see. Teleport player, because this function we're in just checks whether or not they should teleport, and this one actually teleports them. So this can be private. And like the other one, we want this to take in a first person character for who to teleport. And we'll just call it player. And then we'll say teleport player and get player. Okay. So this is all fine and dandy, and this works pretty well. But I did from my testing, I figured out sometimes it would teleport you back to the other teleporter as soon as you went through the first teleporter, just because of like floating point error, I guess. So what I ended up doing here is also like as well as checking if the player is behind the portal for if they should teleport. We can also check if they're actually pressing the keys in the direction like into the teleporter. So if they're not actually physically trying to walk into the teleporter, then don't teleport them. And that seemed to fix a lot of those bugs as well. So let's also just do a little and here. And we want to check if the player, like I said, if the player is walking in towards the portal. So we can say get player, get last movement input vector, which is the last input he's pressed in world space, basically. We can normalize it, and then we can do dot product, and we want to do that with the portal's forward vector, so get active forward vector. And we want to check if this is less than 0. And if it is, that means he is trying to walk into the portal. So we'll do an and we'll hook that up to there. All right, so now let's come into here and let's just do a quick print string, just make sure this is working. And we'll just say teleport. So when I pass through the portal, it should print teleport, which it did. It prints it a lot because it doesn't actually teleport me. So it's like keeps trying for me to teleport, but that's okay because once it actually teleports you, it won't do that. All right, so that's working. And I need a drink because I've been talking for like 6 hours. So hold on. All right. My voice is like shot because I've been talking forever. But this is the last function, I think. So we just have to get through this and then we'll be done. All right. So yeah, so we basically just want to put him where he needs to be and at the correct orientation and at the correct velocity too. So you got to think if he's going through one portal and he comes out another portal at a 90-degree angle, we don't really want to maintain his velocity in the way he was going because then he'll come out of the portal kind of going to the side. So if he's running really fast forward, we want him to run really fast forward coming out of the portal. So we need to figure out his relative velocity before he goes into the portal, so that way we can reapply it when he comes out of the portal. So to do that, we can say get player and get actor transform and get velocity. And then to get his relative velocity, we just do inverse transform direction. And that is his new relative velocity. Hook that up as a local variable. Relative velocity. And then now that we have that, we can actually do the teleport. So we'll say get player. And we'll say set actor location. So now we need to calculate his location. So it's not quite as simple as just setting his location to the location of the new portal, because if he goes through on the left side of the portal, he won't come out of the left side of the other portal. Or if he goes to the bottom side of one portal, like he needs to come out of the portal at exactly the same relative location that he went into the other portal. So we need to do a little bit of math to figure that out. And it's just a bunch of matrix math. And because my voice is literally about to die, I'm just going to do it and you can copy it and hopefully you can understand this. So we're going to get the back facing scene, which is just this guy. And we're going to say get world transform. And we want to convert We want to use this, or sorry, we want to convert this to the parent space, which is going to be where the camera is. So we can say convert transform to relative, and then we want to get the camera again. So get player, get first person camera, and get world transform. And then we want to multiply that by the linked portals transform. So say multiply. Maybe we won't. I think it's called like compose. Yeah, compose transforms is what it's called, but it's just really like a multiply symbol. And so we want to drag in the linked portal and say get actor transform. And so this is going to give us the relative transform of where the player should be to the portal that we're teleporting to. And you can see this gives us, if we split it, this gives us the location and the rotation. So for the location, we could just pass it in here. I found that it's better if we add a little bit to it, so that way you actually teleport a little bit in front of the portal, and that just kind of fixes some small little bugs of not quite teleporting to the correct location. So what I ended up doing is just saying vector add, or just add, I guess, now. Oh, come on. Add. Okay, add. And we want to add a little bit in the direction of the forward vector of the portal we're coming out of. You can try it without this, but maybe you'll see what I mean if you take this part out. So get linked portal, and we want the forward vector, so get actor forward vector. And we want to multiply this by some small number. So whatever you multiply this by is going to be how far it pushes you in front of the portal that you come out of. So you don't want to make it too high, otherwise it's going to be noticeable. But if you just set it to 10, it's not even noticeable. Just make sure that you teleport to a good location. And then hook that up to the new location. And then for the rotation, since we're using a character, we don't want to set the rotation of the player. We want to set the control rotation, since that controls the actual rotation of the portal, or sorry, of the player. So we'll say get player, and then we want to use set control. I guess you need to say get controller first of all, and then set control rotation. And then we can't quite just hook this up because otherwise we're going to have weird things happening. Like we don't want the player to ever roll because that would make your screen tilt sideways. So we want to make sure that we just get rid of the roll. So we can say break rotator, and then we can say make rotator, and just get rid of the roll like by doing that. So just leave roll at 0. And then we can pass this into the new rotation of our character. And then finally, we want to reapply this relative velocity. So to do that, we can copy our player and say get movement component and set velocity. And we want the velocity to be relative to his new rotation, not his old one. So we need to transform the velocity by his new transform. So we can, let's see here, take the player, and for his location, we just want to say get actor location, and then for his rotation, we want to use the one from the control rotation. So we actually want to use this and say get control rotation, because we can't use the rotation of the player directly because it won't have been applied yet, since we just now set the control rotation in this frame. And then we can say make transform. There we go, make transform. So that's the location. That's the rotation. And then finally, we can take our relative transform or sorry, our relative velocity. And we can say transform direction, hook this guy up, and plug that into our velocity. All right. So did I actually call this function? Yes, I did. All right, so let's give this a try. So we put one over here, we put one over here, and we walk through, and bada bing, bada boom, we did it. Amazing. Now it does seem to have some sort of little flickering going on. Let me look at that for a second. All right, so to fix that flickering or that jumping, let's check. Let's go back to the teleport player inside the BP portal. Make sure teleport is set to true. And then we also, I forgot, we need to add the offset of the camera. So we just want to just copy these two nodes, the player first person camera, and we want to subtract this, or we want to subtract the relative offset from that. So just say get relative location, and then we want to do a subtract here. So subtract these two guys, and then that's what we want to end up using inside of here. And that should get rid of that jumping. All right, so let's give this a try like this. All right, so we shoot in here, everything looks good. And then we can walk through it and it's nice and smooth. Now, what I meant at the beginning when I said like this isn't a like perfect implementation. So you can see there's a little bit of flickering in the background. I think that's just Unreal like panicking because it realized it has to render something that previously wasn't rendered. Like sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. It seems pretty inconsistent. But yeah, I mean, hopefully this can get you like 90% of the way there if you're trying to do it. I spent a long time trying to figure out how to do this. And I got it like as smooth as I could get it. So hopefully it can help somebody out there. With that being said, if you guys like the video, I put a lot of time into this one. Please leave a like and subscribe. I also have a Discord in the description, and there's ways to support me like on Patreon or whatever. If you guys want to do that, that's also super appreciated. Otherwise, I will see you guys in the next video, and thanks for watching.